would you please join me in welcoming the person who will introduce everyone else? That is the head of the music department, Professor Barbara Mccargo.
Thank you, Brent. Well, it is our pleasure again this year to bring over students and faculty to share something that we know and we've enjoyed about the women composers of the world. We are starting the program today with the Baroque era, and one of my colleagues, Dr. Giuseppe Lupis, will be demonstrating and performing music of the wonderful Elizabeth Claude Jacques de la Guerre. Let me share a few thoughts about Elizabeth. I've had the pleasure of performing a great deal of her music, generally cantatas, so it's going to be a real treat for all of us, especially me, I think, to hear a beautiful little keyboard piece by Elizabeth. She was a French composer of the Baroque era and harpsichordist. She was a very gifted child, like many of you out there, born into a musical family, again, like many of you here, who at the age of 10 was already being written about in the publication Mercure Galant as one who had been displaying the qualities of a musical proficient for the past 4 years. So that takes us back to the age of 6. Elizabeth Claude was singled out by King Louis IV, who placed her in the care of his mistress. He always encouraged her career and provided audiences for her performance at Versailles. And the king did not mind her dedicating compositions to him, which she did almost all of the time. In September of 1684, she was married to the organist Marin de la Guerre. With her only son and her husband dying in 1704, she remained in Paris composing music and performing. De la Guerre's talents for improvisation and playing extemporaneously were renowned, and though she retired from public performances in 1717, she did compose a Te Deum, which was sung to mark the recovery from smallpox of Louis XV in 1721. Elizabeth Claude's body of work includes harpsichord pieces, a 5-act opera, and soon after were sonatas, a pair of suites, 12 cantatas in French on biblical themes, and 3 secular cantatas. She was the most prolific female composer of the Baroque era. Dr. Giuseppe.
Thank you. I will say a few words just to give some context to the simple minuet that we're going to play. And this minuet was singled out by a student who's doing an independent study project on women composers and the Baroque era. Just to have an idea of what's happening in France right now and where de la Guerre is positioned, when we look at a composer, we always look at some characteristics like, was this composer mainstream or was this composer an innovator? And also, once we have a body of work out, did this composer influence others? And obviously the answer is not always clear and cut, but there is a reason why we play Beethoven more than Pixis nowadays, whereas Pixis was much more famous at Beethoven's time. And because probably Pixis was a little bit more mainstream than Beethoven was. And we found, with the advantage of posterity, that we can read Beethoven's music differently and assign a different value that perhaps was assigned at that time. Well, the same happens here with de la Guerre, one of the few female composers, certainly very successful, as Professor Mccargo just said. The idea is that not only this was a successful composer, but we can still find scores available. Sometimes we have great composers, but we don't have the music. For example, of Chopin, we lost 6 waltzes. There was a fire a few years after his death that burned basically his sister's house, and a lot of his music disappeared. So we have only the first 4 measures of those waltzes in a catalog. But of De la Guerre, we have pieces. We have the entire collection of her pieces for harpsichord, which were published in 1687. That's fairly early. Now, the first published music was 1501 by Ottaviano Petrucci in Venice. So that was about 176 years later that was published, not that far. And prior to that, there is only one notable example, which is Chambonnière, who was a composer born in 1601. De la Guerre was born in 1665. And yet, she published her collection only 17 years after Chambonnière. And those collections of suites, which is an ensemble, is a set of pieces, a set of dances. And dances, by dances, I mean pieces that have a rhythm in it. We're typically pivoting on the typical structure of allemande, courante, sarabande, and gigue. This was the core of dances that you would find in a suite. After that, however, we have Couperin and Rameau, Couperin born in 1668 and Rameau in 1683, so a little bit later, who do write many sets of pieces for harpsichord, which also speaks to the importance of the instrument at that time. Couperin wrote wrote 4 collections, and so did Rameau, although his last one was for harpsichord and other instruments, so were called harpsichord in concert. But the suite changes a little bit, and at that point it becomes what we know as ordre. That is a set of pieces with no particular order, in spite of the name, which are no longer called with the name of dance, but with names of characters or facts or events that are happening at court or some known people. Therefore, they're still dances, but the name is kind of hiding the actual dance under it. And as we know, we have to wait for Bach to come. Bach was born in 1685, 2 years after Rameau, and tell us, no, the suite is still based on the allemande, courante, sarabande, and gigue structure. We have the French suites, the 6 French suites, the English suites, and then we have the partitas that will basically put the word end on this. Now, as far as minuet goes, and I will not take too long, the minuet is a dance in 3. We know a lot of dances in 3. We know the waltz, the mazurka, the chaconne. We know the minuet, of course. The difference is in several features that are either harmonic or melodic, or sometimes rhythmic, like in the minuet. You will recognize a minuet when you hear this rhythmic feature. Or sometimes you have a quarter note followed by 4 8 notes, and then again 3/4 notes. And sometimes you find variations on those. But that's the idea that is behind the minuet. So we should be able to spot it right away. And sometimes composers change this, but De la Guerre wrote an absolute perfect minuet in terms of mainstream minuet, and yet she was so far ahead of her times. I will say nothing else, I will just play.
Thank you so much. I always love these lectures. I learned so much about things that I knew nothing of. And that would bring to mind the next two composers that the Women's Chorus, conducted by Dr. Mark Webb, are going to bring to light for us this afternoon. We're going to begin with the composer Eleanor Daily, presented by one of the members of the group, sophomore BA in music student Taylor DeRoos, and then Susan Bromfield, arranger, presented by Sophia Kirchhoff Jr. in the Bachelor of Music. Thank you.
Our first composer is Eleanor Daily, and she is a Canadian composer born in 1955. Her music studies were quite extensive. She has a Bachelor of Music degree in organ performance from Queen's University in Kingston, Ontario. She also holds diplomas in piano and organ from the Royal Conservatory of Music in Toronto and Trinity College in England. She now works as a director of music in a church in Toronto, and she also does freelance accompanying for different children's choirs, such as the Bach's Children Chorale. Eleanor Daily has over 100 published choral compositions. Of these compositions, many have been widely performed, recorded, and aired throughout North America, Great Britain, Europe, and South Africa. Several of her compositions received the National Choral Award for Outstanding Choral Composition of the Year. Eleanor Daily is an extremely admired composer, most especially for her gift for writing sensitive and beautiful melodies. Her works are most notable for her elegant interweaving of text and music. The piece we will be performing today, The Lake Isle of Innisfree, is a composition that is a setting of a W.B. Yeats poem. This piece can be described as a simple and delightful setting of a poem which embraces nature's beauty and the secret joys of solitude. Daily uses sparing harmonies throughout, which creates a lot of opportunity to find meaning and expression in each phrase. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy.
A native of South Louisiana, Susan Bromfield teaches music education at Texas Tech University. She conducts the Cathedral Singers, Genesis, and Chorale, and coordinates children's choirs at First United Methodist Church, Lubbock, Texas. She holds degrees from Louisiana Tech University and Stephen F. Austin State University, and Codally certification through the University of Texas. She teaches pedagogy and folk music and Codally certification programs at the University of North Texas and Westminster Choir College. Ms. Brumfield arranged and recorded Chiny Doll, a collection of folk song lullabies, and she specializes in the study of authentic performance style of folk music. She is currently doing field research in Scotland, tracing the roots of American folk music and traditional Scottish music. Ms. Brumfield has presented lectures/demonstrations at the national conferences of the Organization of American Codally Educators and the American Orff Schulwerk Association, state conferences of both the Texas and Louisiana Music Educators Associations, and numerous regional workshops throughout the United States. And now I will read her commentary on her song, No Time. This arrangement combines two camp meeting songs, Rise, O Fathers, and No Time. When sung separately, each goes through the entire progression of fathers, mothers, brothers, sisters, sinners, before concluding. Both songs were collected by Loman Chancellor from Kansas City, Missouri, who learned them from his grandfather, James Reuben Broyles, a Missouri preacher. The arranger first heard the two songs performed as a medley at the San Antonio Folk Life Festival in August 1991. I hope you enjoy.
The final presentation today is on composer Gwyneth Walker. She is known for a variety of different pieces, and we have one of our adjunct voice instructors, Jessica Louise Coe, coming forth to share some words about Gwyneth Walker. Jessica will be accompanied in the program by Andrew Bergeron on guitar. Jessica?
Hello. So Gwyneth Walker is a living American composer whom I had never heard of until a few years ago when I was studying for my master's degree, and my vocal coach recommended one of her songs, and ever since then I've kind of been hooked to her music because it's lovely. The melodies are, I wouldn't say simple, but there's a clarity to them that gives them almost a sensitivity and a sense of personability that I think is unique to her music. I'm going to tell you a little bit about her. She grew up on the East Coast and claims that she started composing at the age of 2, though I'm skeptical. I know a lot of 2-year-olds, so. But she did not have any formal training as a child. She just wasn't interested. And it wasn't until college that she became interested in studying music via music theory, of all things. And since then, she studied at Oberlin and received degrees in music theory. She became an instructor, but was able to leave teaching in 1982 and has been composing full-time ever since. So she's one of the few composers who's able to make a living just on composing. And she credits it to her strong Quaker faith. So that's something that came later on in life to her as well. She recalls going to a Quaker service in her 20s and being so taken with it that she converted. And she's very specific about choosing poetry that reflects her Quaker values, which, according to her, is not always easy. So it's no wonder the 2 final pieces on the program were written by herself. She has more than 300 pieces of music to her credit for choruses, for ensembles, solo instruments, and she has many works for voice, for piano, that have been performed all over the country, have been recorded, and the ones that you'll hear today were actually first written for piano and then later transcribed for guitar. And I love them with the guitar arrangement because they have a folk quality to them that I think demonstrates who she is as a person. She's just a simple woman who has a gift for writing music and lives on a dairy farm in Vermont. And I think that her music reflects that simple life, and I hope you agree. Enjoy.
face to the turning sun, till your feet come in from the field. Seven circles, my love, for your good breaking. My lamp makes a circle of light. My lamp makes a circle of light. Seven circles, my love, then your life for an hour in the hot unbroken circle, circle, circle of my arms. When the streets are new with dawning, night lamps glowing, capering eyes, walk gently in the song of morning. You are with me as I arise. Still, still, beyond my fingers, beyond the reaching of my eyes, comes the time beyond my seeking. You are with me as I arise. Comes the time beyond all question. Is it you or is it I who spoke the word to crack the darkness, to bring you near as I arise? Love, love, this moment glistens in secret mourning of our lives, beyond the speaking and the breaking. You are with me as I arise. voiceless tune descends her voiceless tune. My love walks in silver, with her tears she holds the rain, and lighter than the snow-felt dove, I kiss away her pain. I kiss away her My love walks in crimson, with her light she holds the dawn, and I shall follow her rivers winding down until we two are one, and I shall follow her rivers winding down until we two are one. My love walks in scarlet, with her eyes she holds the sun, and I shall love but her alone. I shall love but her alone, and I shall love but her alone, until my life is done. Until my life is
Thank you, performers. As was noted at the beginning of the program today, there are a few minutes here for questions and answers. So I know our performers are scattered about, but they are on the premises here. So if you have a question for Dr. Giuseppe Lupis, for Dr. Mark Webb or the students of the Women's Chorus, or for Jessica Louise Coe and Andrew Bergeron, please wave your hand and Mr. Mark Schmidbauer will come over with a microphone. Anybody? Yes, I see a question.
This is about the pieces we just heard. I'm curious about the guitar transcription. It was so wonderfully done. Who did the transcription? She did. Okay, thank you. She did, the answer.
That was quick. So Gwyneth Walker did the transcription for guitar from piano on those pieces. Another question.
I'm just curious, when the guitarist plays those harmonics, the twing at the, what piano sound was that before they did the transcription?
I wonder if it's a sustained sound, just.
I don't know, I play the guitar. It's a harmonic on the guitar. It's probably just a higher note on the piano. I don't know, whoever did the, well, I guess Gwyneth Walker, the transcription, or either she knows guitar or a guitarist helped her because it's really nice. Many transcriptions that go piano to guitar are not right. They're difficult, too difficult for what's supposed to happen. These are really, I think, some of the best examples of piano to guitar. So I don't know what the piano did. I didn't look at the score, sorry. I was practicing.
One can only imagine, I suppose. Other questions for the performers? I was going to ask the women's chorus, what did you think of those pieces that you performed? Would you like to do more by those composers? I see a lot of nods. Is there more coming, Dr. Mark?
Not this semester.
Not this semester. Okay. Great. I should ask you something more. Do any of your singers have a question for you about how you selected those pieces? So, Dr. Mark, do you have a favorite female composer for women's voices?
Gwyneth Walker.
Yeah, but you did something, was it just last year?
Just last year. We
Okay.
did 2 works by her, so, yeah.
Ah. Oh, we've got a Gwyneth Walker fan club going on here at Aquinas. Okay. Other questions? Yes, oops, in the back.
Just a question for Giuseppe about ornamentation. There was a lot of ornamentation in the piece. How much of it was written out? How much room is there for improvisation, particularly in this more French style?
Thank you. So the ornamentation that was written in the transcription was the one that you heard. It was typical for performers then to improvise. That was the form of virtuoso playing, and also because there were limits in the instrument. The instrument couldn't do much of expression in terms of crescendo, diminuendo, etc., because it was just a harpsichord. And so the ornamentation was also a way to let people stop for a second and say, listen to this note, listen to this particular note. I think, like everything, there's a moment in which this particular use is peaks at a certain point, and there's an abuse of it, and then we start with a clean slate again. I can think of, examples in the vocal field. I can think of Rossini and had everything that has been done with it. What I always think is, as long as there's taste in what is done, I think is acceptable. Beyond that, obviously, no.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, I suppose that concludes our program from the music and the musicians here today. Thank you. And when is the next AQ lecture series?
I think it's 2 weeks. I should know off the top of my head.
Okay. April. We're into April then. Okay, wonderful. So come on back. Thank you so much.